Hello, and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. This podcast is dedicated to the aspiring writer and artist and will provide inspiration and tips from top professionals in the field. If you've been listening to this podcast or are new to it, I thank you very much. I would also appreciate if you took a moment to follow it on whatever platform you use to listen to your podcasts. Writers and Illustrators of the Future is one of the longest running writing competitions in the world, now celebrating 4 decades of providing a helping hand as initially conceived by Owen Hubbard. I also want to let you know that the Writers of the Future volumes are available in bookstores throughout the US, Canada, the UK, South Africa, and Australia, as well as through all major online retailers. I'm here today at the Writers of the Future workshop, and the writer winners have just gone off to start their 24-hour story, which gave me an opportunity to steal Jody, Lynn Nye, and Robert J.Sawyer, the main instructors, away for this interview. So welcome, Jody and Rob.
Hi, how are you?
Hi there. Thank you for having us.
So I woke up in the middle of the night last night and I said, Jody and Rob are going to be available after they go off. Let's get them, because I've interviewed you both multiple times individually about your books and about, the 40 years as a contest. But talking to you as the instructors, I did it the first time when Orson Scott Card, Dave Wolverton, and Tim Powers just finished the workshop. I interviewed them all. That was one of the first podcasts I recorded way back when. And I haven't done this since. And it was a really good interview, just talking about what it means to the genre, to the type of people we have that make it here. Because all we know about them is their story. We have no idea of personality or anything. So as the coordinating judge and the lead instructor, Jody, tell me a bit about what it's like being the instructor. And then I'll ask you, Rob, and then it's going to be pretty much of a free-for-all as we're going through this thing here. So go ahead.
Okay. This is a great group. It means a lot to them to have a support group. When you're a writer, you work alone. So you don't have anyone that you can really rely upon or who understands exactly what you're going through at that moment. With this group, they are the 12 winners who are going to appear in volume 40. So they are a troop unto themselves. They are the cadre of story writers for the 40th anniversary volume. And that means that they have an automatic social group and critique group if they so choose. But certainly they have people who understand what they are going through, because no one else will ever be able to equal this. The previous group of winners, the next group of winners will have things in common with them, but only they understand what they had here and now. I love having them introduce themselves, having them interact with each other and with us. We get to know them. We work very hard on learning their names. And it's often fun to talk to the people, because I don't have a connection with them until I meet them. But I have read their stories. I have critiqued their stories, but I don't know their names. Not until this moment when I am able to sit down with them. So for me, it's rewarding as well.
That's great. And Rob?
It's fascinating to meet this group. As a judge in the contest, the judges all collectively, every single one of us, read the 4 quarterly first prize winners to pick the grand prize winner. And then we're sort of randomly assigned a separate quarter. So we haven't all read all the stories by everybody. We haven't, but what we find is it's exciting to connect for those stories that we have read, the faces. And, sometimes, oh yeah, I knew that was written by a mature person, somebody who's got some years on it. And sometimes you're blown away by the incongruity between, either the maturity or the youthful exuberance of the story and the person who's written the story. There's a joy in connecting that. As Jody said, we don't know who these people are. And this is 100% a meritocracy. There's no looking at anything other than the manuscript. And in the old days, that's how publishing used to be. There was no face-to-face meeting of editors or agents at science fiction conventions or literary pitch fests or so forth. It was all done by the males. It was all anonymous. There's the famous cartoon that says, on the internet, nobody knows that you're, and I forget what the animal is, a dog, right? And you could be anything and be a writer. What mattered was talent. And this contest is now 40 years. Has a history of really doing a spectacular job of uncovering that talent. And Jody, of course, as the coordinating judge, is essentially the arbiter of, what constitutes the best of what comes in. Ultimately, all of us judges choose the grand prize winner, but Jody is the one who's made our first, second, and third place quarterly choices, picks the 12 out of the thousands who have come in a given year. And it's such a winnowing down. But because the contest attracts such talented writers, I've been a judge for over 20 years now, never read a bad story. They're not all to my taste, of course not.
Right.
But I've never read one where it lacked craftspersonship, where it lacked ambition, where it lacked talent on the page. And it's such a testimony to this contest that year after year after year, the coordinating judge finds a dozen world-class, brand new writers.
And I think just to further clarify that a bit, so you've narrowed down to 8
stories per quarter, of which 3 are chosen by the judges of that particular quarter. I try to make certain that I have a variety of voices, a variety of subgenres, because to have 2 people who have both written, say, space opera in the same quarter is to judge apples to apples, and that wastes an opportunity for another subgenre to come out, to have humor, military science fiction, to have historical fantasy, time travel. All of these things I want to bring forward. I also look for voice and first person versus third person. There are so many facets that come into it, but these are the best of the best. I do not settle for something that I think is, I won't say mediocre, because if they get as far as me, they're at least good. But the ones that are excellent stand out.
Right.
And I really wish that I could put forward all of them. But in the end, the 8 stories that go to the judges, there are none better in the quarter.
Which is great. And we put in about, half a dozen years or so ago, where we use the English that the winner wrote in. So if it's British, if it's Australian, South African, US, Canadian English,
That's right.
Don't you know?
That's right. Oot and a boot.
Exactly. Then that's what gets published. And so that was a change that we made, which I think was really good, because it tends to validate the global aspect of the contest with entries. Now, every English-speaking country we have entries from. That's something that was really good. And so whereas on the illustrator side, you see so many different types of art in there, which I just totally love Echo and her ability to do that. Same thing goes here now with the writer side. I'm always blown away with how they think that. You've got, I don't want to say the same worn tropes, because they're not, but sort of, it's like the same stuff that,
But a fresh take.
Total fresh take. And what you're able to find with that, and that they're able to do this, I'm just totally amazed.
If they only have a trope, they'll never make it to the finalist.
Right.
There has to be something about their voice, some spark that really excites my interest, that tickles my imagination. You can write a trope story and have nothing new to say. But if they are writing something that we would consider a trope, such as Saving the Princess or The Mad Scientist, his invention gets out of hand, if they have nothing new to say about it, then it's really not a candidate for a finalist position. It's just not. But also when they come up with something that is really unique, as so many of the stories in this volume are, that just delights me. I laugh out loud.
No, and there's so many types of stories, and some of these things you hear, like, I'm never going to have this. And you take a look in there, there's one of those stories. It was just so fresh and so unique and so like, My gosh. And in a review, which we'll talk about a bit later, you talk about you're kind of surprised when you see the author compared to the story. The two girls writing, you think them
Sisters.
two sisters, and you think them be like something gay, frolicky, and the review saying this is the story is The Wall Isn't a Circle is a truly disturbing tale, and when I showed them the review, they went, "Oh, goody."
That's right.
That's what we wanted to do. And that's what we like.
Very often the darkest writers are the most cheerful person in real life. Absolutely. I mean, Stephen King is not a melancholy, unpleasant, nasty man, but he writes about melancholy, unpleasant, nasty situations and characters.
And dogs.
And dogs.
And dogs.
And dogs.
Yes.
That's right.
I thought that the two sisters, their story suggested to me that they were actually older than they are. I
Yeah.
was very surprised at how young they are,
Yes.
but such a mature outlook and
Mhm.
such a fantastic twist, because approximately 7/8 of the way through the story, it seems like it takes a weird left turn, but it doesn't, because it's completely part of the story. I just love that.
No, it was great. And now I can talk about some of the different stories because now this is going to be airing after
After.
the book releases.
Mhm.
Like the story Dakota.
Dakota, yes.
I loved that one. It was just, to me, it was like, I love all different stories about them. It just really struck me as like, oh, this is really cool. The fantastical there, but taking an alternate history. So I'm really anxious for him to meet Steve Sterling.
I will put them together.
Good, yeah. But I'm just so many different people are anxious. My hero is, I love Jody, I love Steve, I love Rob. The different people that are looking forward to meeting their heroes. As baby writers now coming up into the ranks.
It's really flattering. But as Jody said, we have this whole range of different types of stories. And I know, and I've talked to some of the other judges, we bend over backwards not to favor our own personal type of story. I'm a hard science fiction writer. Steve Sterling writes military SF and alternate history. Greg Benford, hard SF. Nancy Kress, a lot of genetic related. We may see that, oh, that's like something I would write. That doesn't give a leg up at all. We bend over backwards to, if it's an epic fantasy, which is not what I write, but if it's the best story, it's going to get my first place vote. Absolutely. And we're very, very careful to make sure we're not just, reinforcing our own particular take on what the genre should be, but recognizing the vast possibilities that science fiction and fantasy represent.
Yeah. When I was at Superstars with Kevin Anderson, he said, "This is the hardest year I've had on judging." And for the writers, it was like everyone was first place. At one point or another, there was like, it was within a 1 or 2 point difference between the winner and not winning. It was like, they said this was so hard this year. So we had to make sure everybody was in to
Good.
be able to tell. It was like, it was amazing. I've never been able to, distinguish, a first place from a third place. If they're in the book, like I said, Dakota, I think, was a third place. I love that story.
Yeah.
And so that happens frequently, where I'll just get something. I think it's so cool. Just, it does attract my taste because I proofread everything as part of the book going out. And it's just, I wanted to get it from, like I said, from the take now of judges, both as one teaching, you can't say the kids because they vary in range from
They
like
certainly
18
do.
to 65.
No, they're my kids.
Okay, Mom.
They're my kids.
But now a little bit like what you go over, because right now they're in 24-hour store. You've been with them for a day and a half, and you go through a whole thing. We've got some of the stuff that was put in the original workshop by Algis was you have the item that's a worthless
prompt
a worthless object. You've got meet a stranger, and the third one is the how to research. They used to go to libraries.
Right.
Now it's like how to do stuff on.
Now they have Google.
And as I
Google,
said just before we started, don't use any AI tools. You might use them in your career, in your life, but don't cheat yourself. Do the hard work this 24-hour period. Don't let ChatGPT help you write your story. Certainly don't ask Bard or some other AI engine to summarize all your research for you. You have to learn how to do all these things on your own, and you're not going to come up with a digestible pablum that you get out of an AI at this stage of our particular time in history. You're going to bring your own take to it, and that's what we want.
Mm-hmm.
Your creativity and your ingenuity at doing research and interviewing people, and your inspiration. You don't say, okay, I handed somebody a ribbon, a bow, like you would put on a present, and he could certainly go and put into Chat GPT, I want a science fiction story that features a bow. And he has 23 hours and 58 minutes left of his 24 because it does it for him in 2 minutes. No, we don't want that. We want you to learn every aspect of the craft unaided. And then maybe, yes, in your day-to-day life, as these tools mature and as the markets decide whether or not they're going to accept work that has been aided by artificial intelligence and its creation, you may or may not incorporate that down the road. But at this stage, do everything. You're going to do it on a word processor, but otherwise the same way that L. Ron Hubbard did it, the same way that Algis Budrys did it when they started the contest 40 years ago, with your own ingenuity and your own talents and not augmented by machine.
I totally agree. And that's one of the things too that ultimately survives. Because I look back, and one of my first podcasts I did with your husband, Bill, was, all the times that publishing was on its ringing its death knell, and it comes back again. And the same thing now, you see the threat of AI generated work. But when you read something that's fresh, because one thing that AI cannot do and will not be able to do is create something brand new.
No,
it can scrape and then mix and match. Yeah.
It is not creating, it is stealing from all the people who have written the source material that they find. At the beginning, the people who created ChatGPT admitted that they had scraped from thousands and thousands of books, and now they're trying to walk that back and say that they did not.
Yeah.
It is destructive to have a system like that relies upon other people's work. At the moment, ChatGPT or any other copyrightable material that is written by an artificial intelligence is not copyrightable.
That's right.
So people are only cheating themselves, because that means that having ripped off from a rip-off engine, which is stealing from thousands and thousands of writers, can so easily be ripped off again by anybody else who wants to steal it from them, because they cannot defend that in court. It does not belong to them.
Right.
It never did. It's easier to see in art, where ChatGPT happens to be very bad at hands. So people will have 3 fingers or 7.
Mm-hmm.
A figure, supposedly a quadruped, may have 5 legs or 6 or 7. It's easier to see in images. But once you start to read a story that was written by ChatGPT, and we have had a few that have been sent into the contest, you can tell.
Yeah.
Because it tends to be an outline instead of a story. It may be a fairly detailed outline, but it will also be repetitive and so bad. They are very bad. And the characters don't have any character. Not consistent anyway. But they would be cheating themselves. Also, one of the things that I find, if you are relying upon computer-generated anything for your outlines or for anything else, is you're distracting your own mind, because you keep going back to, and what did the engine find for me, instead of what you are creating for yourself.
Right.
So we don't even want them to use an AI system for research for this story. We want them to do it by putting in prompts to Google or Yahoo or any of the others and saying, find me information about Teddy Roosevelt at age 20. Find me something about space travel, time travel, jet propulsion engines, and so on. And then read through what they find and determine whether or not that is of use to them, and possibly dismiss that, start over again. Because the discovery gets juices flowing in your imagination, and that cannot be artificially done. It doesn't help your creativity. It's a distraction.
Now, that's one thing too. Like reading some of your different books over the years, I think the first one that I read was Hominids 1,000 years ago. And then
Came out in 2002, won the Hugo in 2003. Yes.
Right. I mean, you take a look at that and you're like, that's not, it was a total fresh take.
Thank you.
You know, and I read a lot. I have to right now for the podcast. You know, I've just uploaded the interview we did, Jody, a few weeks ago. It just went live.
Oh,
and
good.
that's episode, I think, number 273. So that's 273 weeks I've been doing this. And so I've had to read a lot of books in order to prepare for this. And
Sure.
this one here, I'm just kind of like, I'm on a holiday because I'm just have to be at the workshop and see what's happening here to talk to you. I don't have to read any books. I am almost done reading Bill's new book coming out because I'll be interviewing him in a few days. And another person that's coming here, I'm almost done reading her book so I can do those interviews. Steve Sterling's got a book coming out, but it wasn't sent to me by Bain, so I'm not going to be able to do that podcast interview with him. But
it's the one coming from Kasich, his new book. I blurbed it for him. It's a very fine book.
Oh, good. Yes. But on the whole thing of creativity, and since we're on this for a little bit more on the whole thing of AI, I just can't fathom, or I can't see, like with what you've written on the hard sci-fi stuff, because it's in front of the curve, and what the AI does is behind the curve, because all it's taking is so you're into like speculation and new things that can happen. And even the current one that you've got there on the AI one that just came out as a book, I listened to the audiobook, the downloaded. You know, and I've been reading downloaded stories from Writers of the Future for a while, which is, it's always been ahead of the curve with Writers of the Future. I can't see that stuff as AI generated, at least what you're doing. And then on your fantasy stuff, because that's what I'm familiar with the most, is there's a fresh quality to it. And I can only imagine if that was taken and put into AI to do something, it would be so flat and so bland and so like, so what's so special about this? There's nothing that would make you laugh or like go, oh, that's pretty clever, because it's all just so like, been watered down.
They are not capable of an intuitive jump, which is necessary to, say, extrapolate forward with science, or to come up with something fresh to say about fantasy elements that have been treated for 1,000 years or more.
Yeah.
You can have yet another story about any trope you like, any possible iteration of fantasy stories or science fiction stories. And using ChatGPT, of course, it's nothing original. That makes no extrapolation. It makes no jumps.
Right.
And that is how it's going to be very difficult to replace humans. I have no doubt that the more intelligence, the more training that the artificial intelligence engines get, it will seem to move closer to creativity. But it's going to be a very, very long time before it's actually creative, if at all possible.
Yeah. So now, Rob, how do you research your stories? Because obviously you have a lot of science in there, and then a pinch for an inch.
As I said to the group yesterday, 24 years ago, my wife and I moved to Mississauga, which is a city adjacent to Toronto. And one of the criteria for choosing our home was walking distance from the Central Library. And I've only ever been to the Central Library in that quarter century when they've had me in to do readings, because you don't have to go anywhere anymore to do research. And Tim Powers will say the same thing. He writes about all sorts of real places on Earth, and he uses Google Earth and Google Maps and so forth. And the whole world is available. And I do that. I do tons and tons of online research. The most interesting research to me, though, is in books still. Now, I buy an awful lot of ebooks. And what I do is I strip the DRM from them, the digital rights management, and dump them into a full text database. So I own thousands and thousands of ebooks, and I can search them all for any reference to, let's say, Niels Bohr, the physicist, or to Combe-Grenal, which is a Neanderthal site, across. And so you find references in books you didn't even know we're going to be discussing that thing. I find it enormously useful. But you can go to Wikipedia, and Wikipedia has an entry on anything. But for really in-depth discussion of any topic, a 2,000 word or 500 word Wikipedia entry is no patch on a 100,000 word or a 200,000 word good nonfiction book on that topic.
Plus, I'll just make a comment on Wikipedia,
Sure.
which I personally don't particularly like because it's so heavily opinionated, because it's as good as the person that
Yes,
puts their citation in there.
that's right. That's right.
And I remember just when, Elon Musk went on a whole rant about it some years ago about it with what he said, you can ask somebody to do something, and all of a sudden it changes everything about it. I mean, I've experienced that, but what you're saying then, doing the research into the real material, it's like the Cliff Notes it's kind of like that Wikipedia. And you don't have to read the book. You just here's a few notes on it.
Right. And for instance, my book before this one was about the Manhattan Project scientists. And I read multiple biographies, and in the cases where they were available, autobiographies of these people.
I don't remember the biography, though, about him going into the future. That part I didn't.
No, that's true. The science fiction part of the Oppenheimer alternative is mine. But you get biographies in a single volume that have a point of view and often an agenda, as you've just said. So you read conflicting ones, and out of them you find hopefully what is actually
a resolution,
the truth, the truth, or what is going to work for you. If you're writing about historical characters, people say, well, I'm just actually looking at a book because I watched over Easter the 10 Commandments on 4K disc, glorious restoration. And there's a book that I'm looking at now about the historical Moses. And the book is arguing, probably because all it says in the Bible is Pharaoh. It doesn't identify which Pharaoh. In the movie, it's Ramses II, I think. And these two competing.
Is that Charlton?
Charlton Heston is it? Well, no, Charlton Heston. Yul Brynner is the Pharaoh. Charlton Heston is Moses.
Right.
But these two competing Egyptologists are arguing, no, all we can agree on is it wasn't Ramses, and one of them is making the case in this book that it's this Pharaoh. Amenhotep, I think.
Tutmosis III?
No.
No.
And the other one is making a different case.
Oh.
And I can go with that. My job is not to, in any research, not to pick the most likely explanation, but the one that's most entertaining, that isn't easily contradicted by what we already know. So, for instance, I read a lot about quantum consciousness. There are those who think that there's a quantum mechanical aspect to human consciousness separate from straightforward Newtonian physics. It is in the scientific literature, but it is by no means the mainstream interpretation. But it is way more interesting than a lot of the other mechanistic interpretations of why it is we have an inner life. So you look for what you can dramatize and has potential for storytelling. I'm not a university professor trying to teach you about theories of consciousness or about the history of the Manhattan Project. I'm a storyteller trying to excite you with the most entertaining, the most exciting, the most mind-expanding version that can't be dismissed easily as being, no, that's just bunk.
Yeah, I said, reading as much as I do now, it's so easy to just see why I enjoy, reading your books, and why I enjoy reading the Rise to Future stories, because they are so fresh, and there's nothing bland or like that's just kind of like a composite.
Yes.
It's just, they read. There's nothing that makes you stick to it and like makes you want to turn the page and whatnot. Now, one of the things on the workshop, like say you have those 3 pieces of prompt that you use before you send them off in the 24-hour story. One of the things too, I sent everybody a copy of the Owen Hubbard book, To the Stars.
Yes.
Picked it because that was, you said,
one of my favorites.
One of your favorites.
Great hard science fiction novel. A few years ago was a retro Hugo nominee. It's actually not technically a novel. It's short enough that it's a novella.
Right.
But yes, Hugo finalist. It's one of the first ever treatments of relativistic travel, of the effects of time dilation. And it's also it's a rollicking good story too. Yeah, because I know when Tim was co-directing the workshop, you used his favorite Hubbard, which is Fear, which is a
Right.
horror story, also a spectacularly, a spectacular story. But we're playing. I'm a different co-director, and so thank you for choosing one that I'm quite fond of.
Yes, and Jody's going to get next year to
We're going to go with Typewriters in the
Typewriter in the
Sky.
Sky.
Typewriter in the Sky, excellent. That's a great
Yes.
story.
Another fun one.
Yeah.
with To the Stars, because that was written in 1950, and I re-released it when we first started Galaxy Press in the early 2000s. It got a starred review from PW, and then Entertainment Weekly said, "Oh, we want to review this," and I went, "Uh-oh, what's gonna?" Because they're like the full spectrum on their
Mhm.
reviews, and so I sent all the data. I was in as good a communication as I could be then with the editor of the magazine, and it came out, and it was the top level review for that issue. And it said, "This is the science is as good now as it was when it's
is.
as solid now as it was in 1950 when it first got written on that, the Lorentz Fitzgerald formula there. As mass approaches the speed of light, time approaches zero.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
dealing with that phenomenon, it gets really gritty. Still is, and you come back to your home and all your people are gone.
Yes.
Because of the
Yes.
time dilation.
The way that he treats it, the way the story opens is so fresh. Now, according to the introduction, he was taking a class in
Yeah, and
In
what
physics.
became is physics and became known as molecular phenomena then at George Washington. But the opening sentence there: "Space is deep, man is small, and time is his relentless enemy."
Yes, there's a great opening sentence.
and,
Yeah.
and it's the perfect statement of theme that needs to be early in any story. The fact that he has it as his first line is
Yeah.
beautifully done.
Yeah. So how does that work on referring back to that? Because you wanted to go through that. You said, I got you a hard
Yeah, you got me a hard
book.
copy. Of course, I've got e-copy and audio copy, but sometimes nothing just beats flipping the pages
Yes,
because
yeah.
it's about 2/3 of the way through and you find it quickly. What I like to refer to is points of craft. All right. We spend an awful lot of time in this workshop, possibly, if I may be permitted to say, too much time on marketing and not quite enough time, precious time on craft. And what we have in To the Stars is what could have been a very dry, hard science fiction story because the equations, he refers to them, the physics and so forth is, at that time, Albert Einstein was still alive when he wrote this. But what he's tried to do at every point is humanize it. There's always a human consequence to the science. There's always a character who is affected. Mostly it's Alan Corday, who is the main character in the story, but it's also Captain Jocelyn, it's also the other characters aboard the ship. And at the end, there's sort of a Alan Corday surrogate, the next guy who gets shanghaied to be aboard the Hound of Heaven starship for what he calls the long haul. And it's the human aspect. And this is the thing that often gets lost in beginning science fiction writers who are writing hard science fiction. They get so enthralled with the science. The science is fascinating for sure, but it is not story. Story is something that happens to a person that inconveniences them and that they have to find their way around. It may inconvenience them slightly. It may inconvenience them to the point of the point of a gun at that they're afraid of death. But there has to be a human element. And I think what I've referred to repeatedly is, in the story, yes, this meant that story possibility. And there's the most heart-wrenching part of, I think, To the Stars is when Corday finally gets back to Earth and goes to meet the woman who had been his girlfriend and finally really is driven home for him. The disparity. She's now in her 80s and she's feeble of mind and he is just it never equations never do that to you, but a character meeting their beloved and realize that they literally two ships that passed in the night. One ship went off at relativistic speeds, the other one was spaceship Earth and she didn't go anywhere, has destroyed what was the most important relationship in his life. Looking for the character that the science, looking for the character moments you can illuminate based on the scientific premise, is the whole key to writing effective hard science fiction, I think. And it's a great example of that.
Good. Yeah. So if you've not read it, those listening to it, I really highly recommend this. It's just an amazing story. And like I said, it was stated in Entertainment Weekly. It says the science is good now. So it makes it a really good story that is very, very heart-wrenching because you keep on stalking through. And his way he deals with economies, with religion, with politics. It just, you really see the narrowness of it in terms of the grand spectrum of time, how things come and go. And, it's like, wow, you look back, you can see that happening and we're in the middle of seeing that kind of stuff now, how, the pendulum swings back and forth. And but it's interesting how that puts it in perspective. And sometimes, which I'd like to discuss a little bit too, is the usefulness of science fiction and fantasy to deal with issues which are otherwise very difficult to deal with.
Yes,
yes.
That's, to me, the whole point of the genre. And I was just in China. I was co-guest of honor at the World Science Fiction Convention, along with Cixin Liu, who wrote Three Body Problem. What we've been so carefully trying to do, we Americans and Canadians and Brits who've been going over for quite some time now, is help the Chinese, because in particular, things that we find difficult to talk about, you said if Thanksgiving dinner, you say, okay, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion, don't talk about sex, and, you'll get through the meal without having a fight. Those are the easy topics here in the West, because yes, we're polarized on all kinds of issues, but at least we're allowed to talk about them if you're so inclined. In China, they're not allowed to talk about a lot of these issues. And the only way that they can communicate about them and explore the possibilities that might be otherwise suppressed by the government is with metaphor and disguise. So science fiction and fantasy are enormously important. They're important here for that reason, but they're enormously and always have been important in repressive regimes. Soviet Russia was the same thing. Science fiction was one of the ways where they could talk about, maybe this, what we're being told, isn't the only way to structure a society. Maybe there are alternative ways. Maybe we should be very skeptical of what the authorities are telling us instead of blindly obedient to what they're telling us.
Right.
And that's the power of these genres, for sure.
It takes them out of their own milieu and frames it in a place and a time and a people that is not them, so that they can think about a subject that they are perhaps dissuaded from exploring. We discovered when we were also in Chengdu for the Worldcon, and my husband was going to walk home from the now is Museum of Science Fiction, but it was the convention center, back to our hotel. And they said, "Oh, no, you can't do that." He said, it's shorter to walk than it is to take the bus. But you can't do that. Well, why not? It's not raining. It's not far. They have been conditioned not even to think about things that they're not allowed to do. And that is a mindset that is something that we would write about in a repressive society of science fiction, saying, here are the outcomes of what happens when you are not permitted to think. This all goes all the way back to Aldous Huxley and other dystopian stories of
George
the time.
Orwell.
George Orwell,
1984 is totally that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's all of that. A book called This Perfect Day, which is another similar dystopia of people have gotten to the point where even sexual desire, sexual behavior is so repressed that they have a mechanical meeting of bodies once a month or once a week and have no particular attachment to other people. And the more you treat people like things, the more dehumanized they behave and the more destructive things are. What you see in a lot of societies is when you have Maslow's hierarchy having levels chopped off of it, taking levels off Maslow's hierarchy does away with the spirituality, the creativity, the intellectual thought and reducing people to possibly having emotional needs met, definitely having to have physical needs met, or then you actually do have revolution, because when people are starving or sleeping in the streets, then you can't control them anymore. But if you can control thought, then you have a captive population. And it takes daring people
Mm-hmm.
to buck against that. And you lose art there. You lose music. You lose innovation. You see that in Soviet buildings. We visited East Germany, a town in what was East Germany. The 16th century buildings are still perfectly intact, and they're beautiful, and they're sound. And the things that were built during the Soviet period are made of concrete, and they are falling down.
Yeah.
And they are ugly. They
Yeah.
are plain and they are ugly, because that was taken away from them. The ability to create something artistic that is also durable and worth preserving.
What is that line that you use at the opening of the ceremony? A culture is as
It's
rich and capable of surviving as it has
imaginative
artists.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
And when you suppress the imaginative artists,
When you suppress that, then that is the beginning of the destruction of that culture. And other things can move in, and you lose that history.
Yeah. One of the things that I've experienced, because the plus side of reading so much, I don't watch TV and I rarely watch movies. And I remember when I used to, watching the movies when I was growing up, like still one of my favorite movies is like 1950s. They're black and white, and they remembered long lines. The scenes were long. And White Christmas, for example, I just love that. It's just so, to me, it's just so fulfilling as you have the whole arc there, but it's just really, really fun. And then you got later on, you start getting the special effects. But I remember the original, you got what was the first? They had the spaceship on a wire, and they had a sizzler of that going.
Flash Gordon,
Flash
Buck
Gordon.
Rogers.
The first, yeah.
Yes.
And read those, and I didn't see a sizzler on the back of a rocket. I saw a rocket zooming through.
Yes.
My imagination was, I'm with you on that one there.
Mhm.
And you had all the original Star Trek. There's just corny as all get out when you look at what is, but I wasn't seeing that. My imagination was filling in what they weren't able to do technically on the TV show.
Oh,
And
absolutely. There's no better theater than the theater of the mind.
exactly. But I look at now what's happening.
Yes. They've
Let's
spoon-fed you every segment,
every pixel,
everything, every pixel,
of that
and it is no
picture.
longer collaborative.
Right.
And the great strength of prose fiction is it has always been collaborative. When I say it was the most beautiful woman in the world, you have a completely different picture than anybody else does.
Mhm.
Emily, in your case,
Of course,
right? Your wife. If you have, whatever you say, it is always a collaboration. And the loss of that in film and television, I think, actually does make it much less interesting. I totally share your perspective. I watched lots of TV and saw lots of movies growing up, and I feel very little interest. In fact, I was shocked, I will say, about the group here, because I said, okay, so how many of you have seen Casablanca? And like 2 hands went up. And you asked, how many of you have seen Dune Part 2? And every hand went up. And I thought, no. Dune Part 2 will be forgotten. Frank Herbert, great, but it'll be forgotten. Casablanca has survived for almost 80 years now and will be remembered forever. Dune Part 2 is a great technological achievement, as was Dune Part 1. But I would much rather read the Herbert novel and have the sandworms come to life in my mind than to see some CGI rendering of a definitive rendering of what a sandworm is.
This has gone not just in movies and television, where things can only be done one way, but in children's toys. When I was growing up, we had Tinker Toys,
Lincoln Logs.
Lego that could be anything, not Lego that you make the Star Wars TIE Fighter out of.
Right. They are not allowing children to imagine something different. If you build this thing, you must do it this way. You must have this many bricks on this side. You need to have the curved one over here. You attach this one and it has the LED light in it.
Yes.
And it's the destruction of creativity. We are teaching children that play means following instructions, and that imagination has to follow exactly what the creator of the book or the movie, the television program thought it should be. Toy makers are crippling children from having their own imaginations, and they are not being taught how to think, how to imagine any longer. Parents who can recognize that are not as plentiful as the ones who are letting their kids be spoon-fed.
And unfortunately,
Makes
now
me
you
sad.
got the second, third generation of spoon-fed parents. So that's happened to them. That's what they know to do to others.
Mhm.
And
Hand a kid a tablet and he'll be quiet.
yeah,
Yes.
you know, I must admit, as a little kid, I fell in love with Roy Rogers and Dale Evans and
Oh, yeah.
Sky King and all those things there when my parents were at school teaching. But I was totally like you talk about Tinkertoy. I had Lincoln Logs, which was the wooden
Mhm.
things, and I'd use the small one as a fulcrum, and I'd use the other one to make it a bomb, and I'd have my little toy soldiers,
Yep.
red and blue for the American Revolution. I'd then use that and make it as a lever there and shoot my bombs over there, and we play back and forth. It was
Let
just,
me tell you sometime about my friend making a trebuchet to shoot flaming cotton balls out of his mother's sterling silver salad serving set.
Ah,
yeah, good old days.
Yes.
There we go. So on the winners that we've got that we're celebrating now, and we've been, this is 40 years, and it's just, I'm always amazed. I love coming here and meeting the new winners and knowing that I'm going to have a lot of great friends for down the road. And
Mhm.
I'm always keeping my eyes out. My eyes are peeled for like the standouts, like I did with Nettie Okorafor so
Yes.
many years ago.
yes. Who's now a judge?
Yeah. And she would start off, she was like, okay, there's Nettie. She's a cute girl that likes to write fantasy. And then, I just stayed in touch with her, and then I'd see her when she go to San Diego Comic Con, and she got more and more popular and more popular. And we've been friends all along. And then when, then she made it and popped, and she's like, hit the big time. It was a very easy transition, for her. And I got various winners over the years, and I love doing that, just seeing who's there and working with them. What's it like from your perspective? You've got a few more years on it, teaching the whole workshop, but then you've also been teaching the workshop for 20 years as a guest instructor and a judge. From your perspective, tracking careers and meeting new people, and some of them become your peers in very relatively short order. What's it like from your perspective?
Oh, I love seeing it. The ones who have had their first sale through the contest have had that forum, that stage that they are given. Some of them make incredibly good use of it right away. Some of them have, it's like, oh, this is my big chance. And they step forward because they've been waiting for that moment when they have the spotlight to say, and here are the things that I want to show you, the creativity that I want to give to the world. David Hankins last year, he was on the cusp of writing the full volume version of Death and the Taxman, and now it's out as a book.
On Tax Day 2020?
Yeah.
Tax Day, he picked it perfectly.
Yes.
He has a knack for marketing.
Yes.
The ones who are going to make it, you can see that.
Mm-hmm.
The ones who have discovered that, oh my gosh, I have another career coming on. Dave Hendrickson, the grand prize winner from last year, who very modestly at panels introduces himself as, well, I was a winner of the contest last year. Dave, you were the grand prize winner. And he does this every time. I wish we could convince him how good he is and how special. But he had retired from being a computer programmer and never thought that this could be another career. But it is now. So I expect to see great things from the kids who have come through my hands. I get to know them much better than I did just as a judge. I mean, I sat around with all of them on the floor in the room where everyone was bringing their tuxedos back in the first few years that I was a judge, talking to them, hearing how excited they were, how thrilled they were with the gala, and how overwhelming the whole week is for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's different when I'm the one who's choosing their stories and I get to know them in the seminar. I get to see them interacting. I get to know who they are as people. senses of humor,
Yep.
the nervousness, the trepidation, the the fear that they're going to do something wrong, but of course they can't. All the things that they are doing, they are capable of doing. And I just want to see where they go next.
That's great. What about you, Rob?
It's very similar over the 20 years, more now, to watch careers blossom and to think in some small way I've been helpful in that is enormously gratifying. There's a famous saying in science fiction attributed to Robert A. Heinlein: you can't pay back the people who helped you. You can only pay forward to the next generation. And I was extraordinarily lucky starting off in my own career that a couple of more senior writers took me under their wing and gave me helpful advice. And indeed, I entered this contest, and A.J. Budrus gave me useful commentary on a couple of my entries that really helped. And eventually I sold one of them. I guess I sold all of them eventually. But this so resonates when somebody that you have given a hand to goes on to success. And you say, peers, right? I mean, that's true. They very quickly become, many of them, amongst the top science fiction and fantasy professionals today. And sometimes they just blow the rest of us out of the water. I mean, Brandon Sanderson is one of our winners. And, I would be honored if Brandon thought of me as a peer, but he is so far stratospheric beyond almost all of us at this point in terms of his level of popularity. It is gratifying to know that in some small way, I helped encourage Brandon. I said, Brandon, one word, Brandon. I said, Kickstarter. No, I didn't do that. Plastics. One word, Brandon.
Alternate history.
That's right. So, it is so gratifying. Our legacy as writers absolutely is our oeuvre, the books that we've published, but it is also all the other books whose names, whose have in their acknowledgements are names. And I like to thank Jody, Lynn Nye or Robert J.Sawyer, because once upon a time they helped. It means the world to me.
That's great. One of the things too that, from my perspective, from Mr. Hubbard's foundation, that he put in his will that to continue funding this, and just in awards alone, over $1 million, but just everything else that goes into funding the contest, putting everybody up in hotels, flying everybody out, the whole thing for the week-long workshop for 40 years. Just his belief in the genre, what it can do. And because we're a special type of science fiction and fantasy, it's the PG, but it's also, we look for that uptick in the future somehow. And if it's dystopian, it's cautionary, but we're pretty good about that uptick on our stories. And I think this year, we have more first person we've ever had before, which makes it more personal, but that personal uptick is also a nice thing coming out of what we just experienced the last, 3-4 years. But over the years, talking to many of the judges no longer with us.
So sad. In having been with this contest for 22 years now, I guess, to see so many of my idols, because when you asked me if I wanted to be a judge, I just had to look at who already was a judge. And these were, we're lucky enough that Bob Silverberg is still with us. We've lost Theodore Sturgeon. We've lost, more recently, Jerry Pournelle. We lost Anne McCaffrey. But these people were the foundational figures of my reading of the genre. And it is, time goes by, and it is sad. We've lost, I don't know that we've ever had a judge resign, but we've lost judges because they eventually, of course, shuffle off this mortal coil. And it's always a sad day when we lose one of our family.
It is. I remember when Hal Clement was at the office, and his grandmaster, and he was also first fandom.
Yes.
And he was such a nice man, and one of our judges, Jack Williamson, one of the most humble people you would ever know.
Jack was terrific.
When we went to the Writers of the Future event in Cape Canaveral, Cape Kennedy, and we saw one of the shuttle launches, he'd been writing about it since the early 20s, and he'd never seen the space launch. This was, I guess, in the 90s. And he was like a little kid, he was in his mid to late 80s, but he was like, he's just sparkled because we're right out there. we couldn't walk too far towards the edges of the swamp there, because the signs posted beware of snakes and alligators, and we all super sprayed for the mosquito,
bugs.
but it was a mile away. But you're just like, you're shaking as it's taking off.
It feels like your ribs are going to come right out of your body.
Yeah, it's just.
I watched Endeavour launch from. We were on Cocoa Beach, 8 miles away, and it was still so loud the earth shakes. It's just incredible.
It was just an amazing moment. But seeing these science fiction writers who had not experienced that before, it was just.
Oh, wow.
Well, they have not lost the sense of wonder, which is why they're the great ones.
Exactly.
They maintain that childlike excitement about new things happening and seeing their dreams come true.
Which is what's amazing. And that's what's really good about this contest. That was when it was created by Mr. Hubbard, is dreams do come true. And now we have it. It's such a well-known contest after 40 years, and beyond reproach. I mean, I've definitely gone through the gauntlet multiple times on challenging its veracity and the integrity, and it's long since past that point of acceptance. That now, when you tell somebody that they're going to get an honorable mention, it's no longer a reject. I won honorable mention. I see a press release almost at least every 2 weeks. I'll see a press release, when they announced a new book coming out, said, I won honorable mention in Writers of the Future.
Good.
That's the level of credibility.
Absolutely.
Top 10%. And it's something that is very much a thing there. So we've got our last minute or so. So anything, again, girls first, would like to say before we end off this impromptu but totally awesome interview?
Every year we get more and more exciting stories. We get wonderful voices. We get people who are bringing their imagination and their skill to the contest. I want to see more. Send me stories. Send me some more. If you have been submitting the same one over and over again, put it aside and send me something different. I'm looking for the next winners, and it could be you.
Awesome.
Every year I come here. We used to do it at different places in the country. It's been Los Angeles for a decade or more now. Highlight of the year to come here. And it's a highlight on multiple levels. One level is I just love seeing my colleagues who are the other judges. It's like the best, almost like the Algonquin Round Table. It's the best conversation. It's the best shop talk you're going to find anywhere. And the other is, of course, the reason that we're here, which is the nurturing of new talent. It is so satisfying to see that despite people having said to me, and I'm sure to everybody else over the years, science fiction is so narrow. I mean, don't you feel constrained? Every year, these students, these new writers, blow my socks off by demonstrating that within science fiction fantasy, there is so much room still for freshness, for new ways of telling stories, for new takes on old stories, for better or more sophisticated characterization or literary illusion than we've seen in the past. This is a genre, both genres, science fiction and fantasy, that are still creatively very much in their ascendancy. They're getting the best science fiction being published ever. It's being published today. 10 years from now, we'll be able to say the same thing, but with the date of 10 years down the road. The field is getting better. And this contest has been so instrumental in ramping up the quality of bringing thousands of writers who participated, whether they won the contest or not, in the discipline of entering on a quarterly basis, of writing. We have today here at the contest, people writing a story in a day. But for many writers, even the notion that they could do 4 stories in a year, that they could have a quarterly entry, was a huge revelation to them, because so many people talk about wanting to be a writer and never actually do it. This contest, even if for people who have never placed, it has still gotten people to write, and it has moved them closer to fulfilling their dream. And I am so proud to be part of that.
That's very amazing. And thank you both. And thank you for listening. Subscribe to the Writers of the Future podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We've also been syndicated on the United Public Radio Network, where you can find these podcasts as well. Writers of the Future series can be purchased wherever books are sold in the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, and South Africa, and available everywhere via Amazon. We are especially appreciative of our sponsor, Carnation, for supporting this podcast. Carnation was introduced in 1899, and 2024 marks its 125th birthday. So Carnation has been making delicious milk products for 1.25 centuries and is still going strong. Writers and Illustrators of the Future are contests created by L. Ron Hubbard to provide a means for the aspiring writer and artist to be seen and acknowledged for 4 decades. It is free to enter and open to amateur short story writers and artists of science fiction or fantasy. Again, thank you very much, Jody and Rob.
My pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
All right, everybody, it's time for you to get out and nominate your favorite podcasts. There's a show I want you to consider for the People's Choice Podcast Awards. Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast in 3 categories: education, storyteller and drama, and arts. For 5 years and with over 280 weekly episodes and 64 million plus downloads, the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast has provided advice and tips from international best-selling authors, world-class artists, contest judges and winners, and industry professionals. It is based on the world-famous Writers of the Future contest created in 1983 by L. Ron Hubbard to help the aspiring writer and artist no matter their age, race, ethnicity, or gender. It is dedicated to the future of storytelling and art by showing that it is never too late to start, and those who make it are those who never give up. We are all busy, but I'd be so grateful if you could take a moment and vote now. Go to podcastawards.com to nominate the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast in any or all 3 of the categories: education, storyteller, drama, or art. News on the flip side. It's time for you to get out and nominate your favorite podcast. There's an amazing show I want you to consider for the People's Choice Podcast Awards. The News on the Flip Side, in the category of politics and news. News on the Flip Side is a much different news and political program, which is not deemed as opinion news. Listen as anchor host Joe Montaldo brings you just the facts from trusted sources, which will allow you, the people, to make up your own minds on the various stories being reported on. Go to podcastawards.com to nominate the News on the Flip Side in the category of news and politics. That's podcastawards.com. Please take a moment and vote now.
So Emily is polite. I mean, get the bleep out there and vote. So if you were on News on the Flip Side last night, you would have actually heard the bleep word. Because you're an author's quill, you won't actually hear that word. But go listen to News on the Flip Side and you'll hear it. So anyway, people, get out and vote. I expressed this. I don't want to be a runner-up. I want to win. So somebody writes in last night, said, well, Joe, y'all get like second and third every year. What are you bitching about? I'm like, that's exactly what I'm bitching about. I'm like, come on, people. So, we do well. So I know a lot of y'all don't realize this, but the People's Choice Podcast Awards, about 5 million people vote. So anytime you see any of our shows make it that far, I mean, it's great. I mean, it's a lot of people voting. There's a lot of shows on there. And every year there's more shows that get in there that want to get their shows looked at. So, and it does come down to the vote. So they vote 5 million the first time. What is it? 5,000 the second time?
Yeah.
So they select people, shows that didn't make it, the hosts of those shows and other people that come in and vote. So you people, you got to vote. Plus, and you also got to apply to be one of those other voters. Yes. I know where all of y'all live. Remember that. I have Hack Tracer, and it goes out and tells me where all y'all live. Just remember that. When the Russians come, I'm sending to your house first. When Trudeau invades. Yes, I would pay money to watch Trudeau invade something. He can't invade, but I would pay money. But anyway, we got a guest coming to us with the second hour. The first guest today is on hiatus, so we'll see her. And I think it's 3 weeks. Yeah. So
because she wants to be there when I'm there. She's she's a total Marie Whitaker, an absolute sweetheart. She runs the Superstars Writing Seminars, and I did a podcast interview with her, not this year but last year, as well as our next upcoming guest, Todd Fonestock, and Epic Fantasy Series, and just super nice people. I'm really excited about it. And then Todd sent me his. He just published a book, which he sent to me on Thursday, and so I listened to it. Just finished it just a few minutes ago, and it's basically his curve as an author, what he went through to actually make it as an author, and fantastic story. And just you really get you need to really have a drive to make it, but he attends a lot of conventions. We'll see him. You're coming to Dragon Con, right?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah, we'll see him at Dragon Con, I think. And then I'll probably see him next week at San Diego Comic Con. But I was just in Clearwater this last week with Orson Scott Card. We deliver a writing workshop to 130 people. It was just so much fun. We took the online writing course that we have that's free for people to take, the one that you've gone through it a couple times. And instead of playing his videos, we had him live to talk about what his videos did, but we still had all the Dave Wolverton and Tim Powers videos.
Yeah, that is.
And then all the Owen Hubbard articles that they would read. But it was, I ran it as a boot camp. I said, okay, look, we have a schedule. This is a crazy tight, target to get through this course over the weekend, but we're going to do it. We're going to be running you guys hard. So, it's okay, good. We got to get started right now. Okay, next. I was like drill sergeant.
That's how you got to do it, though. When you have limited time, you have limited time. Jackie, he is talking about the Writers of the Future course. So if you go over to writersfuture.com, there's a writers course you can take. It's a damn good course, actually. It's helped me in a lot of ways. No, I am not a writer, but we're not going to get into that. It's a really good course. No. All right, we'll talk about it in a few minutes. But anyway, it's a really good course. You should go take it. A lot of good information. It helped me in places. In all fairness, I probably will finally get a book out, but only because I met these people. The course taught me a lot, but I get to cheat. So, I've been hanging out with and listening to the judges talk to the winners for a few years now. And you pick up stuff. Plus, when I get stuck on something, I just ask. I just go ask them a question, and it's funny because they'll give you a very we'll just say curt answer, and I'll leave it at that. So, like I asked Dean Leslie Smith about a couple of things, and he's like, "Well, first off, just do the damn book, Joe." I was like, "Okay, that makes actual sense." And then he was telling me about taking the end and put it in the beginning and working your way backwards. I actually like that concept, and I had two other judges tell me that while I was there as well. So, and then these judges are world famous. I mean, they have, some of them have movie credits to them. All of them have big book credits to them. So you need to pay attention with it. So for me, it just kind of, it's like an after effect from just being there. I pick up on it, and then every now and then I do have a question, and I can't remember that woman's lady with all the little things and little pieces and stuff. That shit is crazy. Oh no, she give you this paper, and then it's got all kind of stuff on it, and each one takes you to a different part of the story. Oh, I can't remember her name. It was actually quite good. What the hell was that woman's name, John? She wasn't. It was not last year, year before last.
She was at the workshop.
She had like the little thing she would give you to write about.
Oh, that's Nina Kariki Hoffman.
Yeah. So I actually enjoyed that. I didn't think I would. Well, in the beginning, she asked me because I was in the class sitting, and she asked me if I wanted to participate, and I'm like, no, I'm just here as press. And I really didn't think about it. But after I sat there and listened to him for an hour, she came back and seen me. She would you like to take one with you to give it a try? I said, well, sure. I think I actually would. And it's like a cheating way to write. It's like when I learned how to play music by numbers. It's like cheating. Well, what I mean by that is it helps you. It gives you something to write about, basically. And then it helps you to add things into the story by giving you other things to write into the story.
Yeah.
But don't always make exact sense because it depends how you draw and how things are going. But I'm telling you, if you're somebody trying to learn how to write, that's a good way to start to learn. I wouldn't make it your only way of writing, but it's a good way to start to learn. But every time I ask a person what got you into it or how'd you start to write, I never get the same answer, never get the damn same answer. So it's rarely like something, we think just, something common. You think it's always something kind of weird or something that gets people into writing. And you get a lot of them that just tell you, well, it's since I could pick up a crayon, I wanted to write. So
Yeah.
well, no, you get those kind. And I imagine some of those turn out to be really, 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 really good writers.
Yeah, some of us, if people haven't yet, you can't not write is what some of them are, one of their catchphrases, I can't not write. And that would be really great when we get Todd on a bit later on this, in a half hour or so. He's one of those guys that's just like, that was his thing. He had all types of major high-paying jobs, working for nonprofits and stuff and executive positions. He said and it was great because it was like for, things that help people and not, he said, it's not my love, writing was his love. And now he's made it. Now he's able to make a living as an author. But what I just finished reading is Fall to Fly was the name of the book. Just amazing what he went through to finally arrive at where he is now.
Janine, oh, you mean the background? That is actually the professional show. That's Echo Turner's background.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of her backgrounds. No, that's pretty, so I just left it up. When the guest gets in, I'll probably switch it over to the Arthur School. But for now, yeah, we can plug other shows. She's a friend of the network, so we can plug other shows. No, she's an artist, and she's one of the coordinating judges for Writers of the Future. Yes. No, we've talked about it, but she's been on many shows with me. Yeah, we've had some fun times. Matter of fact, if you ever want to see a really good video, it's myself, her, Larry Elmore, and Tom Wood. It's a fabulous video. And then there's one with her, Tom, and Santos.
Santos.
Yeah. Those are great. They're up. They're up on the network. Just look them up. They're under. What are they under?
Writers of the Future?
Probably. It's so these were all done while I was in Los Angeles, so they probably will be under Writers of the Future, unless they were done for a particular show. But I would just type in one of their names in our search thing, and it should come right up. No, they're hilarious. Yes, they're hilarious. It's you learn a lot, and they're hilarious. Yeah, it's funny. That's three serious artists you have sitting there. Or actually, either way, it's three serious artists sitting there. They all really know their stuff. Well, I was talking with a guest just a couple of weeks ago. The book's only as good as its cover. Because unless someone has told you about this book and told you how fabulous this is, you're gonna go, well, why am I buying this book? So you look at the cover and then you look at the back. And hopefully that's enough to make you. But I'm telling y'all, I have bought many books. I'm not lying about this, based on the cover. And I've said this 100 times. Some of them were really good books, and some of them were, well, just books. We'll be nice and just say books. Yes, that's stuff I usually give away to somebody. Give away on the radio station or something. Jimmy, galaxypress.com, yes, or Amazon, any of those places. You're talking about Book 40? Yes. I don't think I have one behind me.
I've got one.
Oh, yes, I do have one behind me. John's got one right there, look. Yeah, I do have one left. There you go.
Yeah.
Book 40. There you go. I knew there was one back there somewhere. It was under the no. Actually, I don't have no. Okay. First off, every one of the Writers of the Future books you see behind me, nobody can have any of those. Those are all autographed books. Those are my personal books. I did dig out a box. I guess one that's shoved underneath a bed somewhere. But I think it's 37 or 38. I don't remember. I have to go look at it. I'm not getting up, but. Sometime, doing some, I'll give them away. And I gave away some books for 4th of July. Mm-hmm. And no, I'm not giving any kind of books like that away. Galaxypress.com. That's where I would go. I prefer y'all to go to their website.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, no, you can buy it anywhere. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Well, if you go to galaxypress.com and you go to the book, we have links to go to Barnes and Noble or Amazon or any place you want to buy your books. You can go there. We have a link to where it's available in all your. If you want to go to your nearby independent bookstore, we got links to go to Indie. Yeah, so we got in Canada, we got links for up there. I think we even got links now for our UK now that's released up there. But you can find Rise of Future Volume 40 depending upon where you are. And we have bookstores in UK, in Australia, in New Zealand, in South Africa, as well as Canada, and obviously here in the United States.
Yes, Ginger, that is the one I was talking about. It is an audiobook. I haven't ordered it yet. Sooner or later, I'll get around to ordering it. Well, because I've read it twice now, maybe even 3 times. So it's not as big a deal to get an audiobook now, but it's because I've read it. Doofus. No, you can go galaxypress.com. That's where you can go get the audiobook. Bam. This year and last year, matter of fact. You get both of them an audiobook. So no, I know a lot of y'all are like me that you prefer audiobooks because you don't have the time. No, you see, this is what's funny about this. A lot of my friends are very funny. They need to feel the tactile sensation of the book. They do not enjoy reading the book. You can give them a pad. You can give one of the greatest epic stories ever written on a pad or a computer. They do not enjoy it the way they do is getting that book. Somebody getting a book, maybe getting a little wine or getting a little coffee or whatever, and snuggle up on the couch or getting in their favorite chair and reading the book. It's different. One of the great things about a pad is you don't have to wear glasses because you can adjust the font to whatever size you want it. Yes, but to each his own. In the very beginning, I was kind of anti-reading on the pad, but that didn't last very long. The pad is a great thing. So honestly, sometimes when we're at work and we're waiting on parts or something to come in, and I'm just sitting around because there's nothing for me to do. The guys are doing whatever. I'll pop something up on the pad. That's why I missed the other pad I had gotten from John and then because I use all kind of shit on there. Excuse my language. But this one, I've put quite a bit of stuff on this one too, so I can pop up stories and listen and do stuff. Or like I was listening to Mission Earth the other day. We were sitting in the office and I was at my office and somebody goes, "What are you listening to?" I said, "Mission Earth." And like, "Mission Earth?" I said, "Yeah." I said, they're like, "Well, what?" I said, "It's a book." I said, "You can go get it." I said, "Evan Hubbard wrote it." I said, "It's available." I said, "This audio version is not, but the written version is." And they started sitting down and they started listening with me. I don't know. They hung out for about 15 or 20 minutes. A psychologist, by the way. And she goes, "Well, this is pretty good." She said, I'm gonna buy the book. Let me know when the audiobook comes out because she was just enjoying it, sitting there listening. Matter of fact, it was me, her, and her client. Actually, her client had just came, and I was in the whatchamacallit room, in the conference room. So it was just interesting to see people sit down and enjoy it. And I know sometimes when I'm at work, because sometimes it's playing when I'm at work. See, when I had the other stuff around, sometimes it'd just be one playing on the pad. I'd set it up on the windowsill or set it up on like the kitchen counter and let it play while we were working instead of music, because we used to play music all the time. I was enjoying listening to the different stories. Yeah, Frank. I mean, audiobooks are great for me. I'm ADHD to start off with, so I can be moving around and listening, and I've noticed more and more. So when audiobooks first came out, the voices were kind of crappy. Let's not lie about it. And then there was things like Microsoft Sam and Samantha Sam that was like, "This is Microsoft. We read to you." No, I can't do that. They got some pretty good voices out there reading now. And I have noticed more and more of putting in subtle sound effects, and even a little more than subtle sound effects. So it's becoming a little bit more sophisticated every year. So it's nice. It's developing into its own industry, and people like me will appreciate it. Well, because when you're reading it, you use your imagination. So, but when you're listening to it, you're only using part of your imagination because there is sound effects. So the sound effect is part of the show itself. So you only have to use a part of your imagination. It's just a little different, that's all. But not all of them, by the way. Some of them are just straight reading. I was listening to what's his name? Oh, what is this guy's name? Chunky black guy, Edward L. Jones. He's got just a fabulous voice. I'm sitting there like, damn, I could listen to this guy all day. I mean,
the last time the audiobooks do is they provide an extra dimension to a story that you won't otherwise get, especially if you have somebody who's a good voice actor. Like on Rise of the Future 40, we got Jim Maskiman. Cameron
Jim is great.
Messman. They're amazing voices. I mean, that's what he
Jim's
does.
great.
The man of 1,000 voices. He just does so many different voices, and it takes a story to a whole new level. And some people don't have the imaginations that others do. And so this really will open it up there. And you've got, like I said, I did this workshop this weekend with Orson Scott Card. He's the guy that wrote Ender's Game. And he almost only listens to audiobooks now. He says, I so much prefer audiobooks to just reading the book, because I can really get, if it's a good voice actor, they pull more out of the story than if you just quit reading through it.
That's how I feel about it.
Yeah. And so that's, so he's totally, that's what he does. He listens all the time. He listens to so many different stories.
No, so Jack, that's what we were just saying. Some people do just prefer the tactile sensation of a book. For me, I just get more out of it. I had probably listened to, I don't know, 30, maybe 35 stories on that pad that I had gotten with John and them. And there was just some good stuff in there. And then when he sent me Mission Earth, well, actually, let me rephrase. He sent me whatchamacallit first, Battlefield Earth.
Yeah.
And now, okay, first off, people, before I get into this, Battlefield Earth is long. It's not like both of these I'm listening to, Battlefield Earth and Mission Earth, are not something you just sit down and listen to in an hour and you're done. So when he sent me Battlefield Earth, he warned me, I think it was 40 hours. I saw that, yes, 40 hours. No, yeah, okay, you can listen this year if you want to listen to it in its entirety. It will start playing New Year's Eve around midnight, and it will play, Christmas Eve, and it will play that whole entire week until until a day or two before New Year's Eve.